The John Murray Show on RTE Radio 1 with SuperValue Travel Insurance. Don't worry about a thing with great value travel insurance online at supervalue.ie.
Now, I'll admit straight up, it's not my area of expertise. The classics, unless it's the 1000 Guineas and the Derby. I wouldn't really know my Iliad from my Odyssey or my Pythagoras from my Plato. But this man beside me does. He's only 16 years of age. Oscar McHale, good morning.
Hello, thank you for having me on.
And it's nice to have you in. And Oscar, where did your interest in the classics start?
I suppose my interest started when I was sort of just about learning to speak. My granddad sort of introduced me to the concept of the Roman army and why it's always important to remain disciplined throughout life. So he sort of taught me that concept because the Roman army have this very sort of strict way of fighting and keeping their lines together. And I suppose it was just sort of, he just sort of very nicely introduced me to that in a very sort of relaxed environment. And then eventually, as I got a bit older, I sort of looked at it and said, well, you know, sorry.
No problem.
Well, you know, what did the Roman soldier need when he was on campaign? He would have needed oats. He probably may have had a bit of bread if he was lucky, but there needed to be someone back in Rome making that bread. And then from there, I'd go back to Rome and I'd say, well, hold on, the Romans took everything from the Greeks. Let's look at Greece. And it just sort of all evolved from there. And so I'm here today with you now.
So your interest in the classics would have gone right through your primary schooling?
Yeah, I mean, obviously because of my granddad, and it sort of, even though I wasn't offered, I always sort of had a great interest in it and would always sort of be very happy when I got to go visit my granddad because we could talk about it and he'd teach me about Caesar, and Caesar has always, even today, remains one of sort of my fascinations within classics, and it's definitely sort of, it's one of my driving forces in my life.
Yeah, and I mentioned at the outset that you're leading the fight back because there has been a big decrease in the number of people actually taking the classics as a subject.
Yeah, that's right. There's some very, very unfortunate figures. Last year, only 500 people sat it at Leaving Cert level. Under 100 people sat Latin, and only a handful, like a very, very small amount, sat Ancient Greek. So we are in trouble at secondary school level. There's no way of sort of getting around that.
Why do you think so?
I don't know, probably because so few schools offer it, and the Irish education system is sort of focusing itself on science and maths. The arts are sort of getting slightly pushed to the side, so we just need to say, yes, we're here, we're important, let's keep going.
In other words, classics, when students are thinking about them, just wouldn't appeal to them. They would suggest that they're not relevant to their daily lives, perhaps.
But yeah, that's some students may say that, but it's absolutely untrue. So much of our culture, from our philosophy, our science, our maths, our society even, it all sort of links straight back into the classics. So to say it's not important is like saying today's society isn't important. It just doesn't make sense.
Yes, and you decided, though, on foot of your huge interest in classics, to set up a society.
Yeah, it happens on sort of, when I was sitting my junior cert last year, I had made sort of a new friend. I was talking to him online one evening, and the way that the junior cert structured was I had my second last exam, which was science, and I had a week between that and my classics exam. And I was talking to him, and he said, "Oh, are you happy the junior cert's over?" And I said, "Well, you know, I'm happy, but I still have one more exam to sit." And he said, "Oh, really? What is it?" And I said, "Classics." And he said, "Oh, I wish I had the opportunity to do classics. I'd love to do classics." So, you know, I sort of brushed that fact aside and I went on. I did my junior cert. Then the summer started. Obviously, I made loads of new friends over the summer, and everyone I told that I did classics, they were like, "Oh, I wish I had the opportunity." So I had this quite tight circle of friends who all wanted to learn classics. And I said, "Well, look, if you're really that interested, I can teach sort of like a class once a week or something, just on sort of a relaxed environment." And it eventually got to the stage where we had our first one, but they had all brought friends, and I had this huge group of people wanting to hear about classics. So I decided, well, let's expand on that. Let's make it into something a bit more. So before you knew it, it was sort of happened. And then I got back to Stratford, my school, obviously in the new school year, and I talked to
the start of transition year.
Yeah, the start of transition year. And I talked to my teacher, Miss Donoghue, who was, of course, delighted at the fact that a student had taken the initiative. And she presented a piece to the CAIT, the Classical Association of Ireland Teachers. And it got a huge, really, really good response. And we grew from there. So I really couldn't have done it without sort of the teachers in Stratford or indeed the community within it.
And where did you have those early meetings of the society?
The very first one, which was titled Society and Religion in Ancient Greece and Rome, I actually had in St. Stephen's Green on the grass. And of course, it wasn't ideal. It was good. Everyone enjoyed it, but we were all really uncomfortable having to sort of move around in the grass. And indeed, myself trying to speak, just trying to sit down in the grass. It was a bit difficult.
It must have been a sunny day.
Yeah, it was a really nice summer's day. It was July the 19th, which we mark as our 1 year anniversary, and that's coming up. Our second one then, before we had sort of a place to give it, was in Accent's Tea and Coffee House in town, and we rented out a space because me and my friends sort of go there a lot, and I inquired one day, well, could we rent part of it? And they said yes. So obviously it started there, and we were planning to have more, but then obviously it took off, and yeah.
Yes, and Trinity came into the picture. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so after the CAIT, after the huge response, Miss Donoghue decided she'd contact one of her old lecturers, Dr. Christine Morris of the TCD Classics Department, and she was exceptionally kind and went out of her way to organise and ensure that we could have a space on a Saturday morning to meet. And we've had 2 lectures there to date, and we hope to have a few more now once the new Trinity term starts after the summer.
And what sort of groups are you attracting then to the meetings?
We get a fairly wide range, all things considered. We have anywhere from 15 to about 18, 19. So we get from, about third year secondary school to first year in college. And indeed, obviously, I'm not the only one running the society. I should say that now. I am chairperson and founder, but I have an entire committee behind me. I have two vice presidents who are Eli Moylan and Dylan Byrne. I have Rachel Marr, who is our fundraising officer and does all the baking. We'll get onto that in a minute, I'm sure. Afric Nivranon, who's our PR officer, and Rory Murphy, who's our treasurer.
And are they all from Stratford?
No, Rory is from Stratford, and he's possibly one of my best friends. So he sort of got into it with that, and I just said, well, look, I need someone who's good at accounting. Can you come in and do it? And he said, okay. The rest now are all just sort of friends from around the place of various different ages. Like some are finished school, some are in 5th year, some are in 4th year. We just sort of come from that, and it's a really nice community, I think.
And do you give the lectures?
I've given, yes, all the ones to date, but because I'm going into 5th year, and obviously I want to expand the society and sort of not just make it just me, I want to invite as many guest speakers in, and we hope in the new year to welcome a UCD academic in to speak, Dr. Philip D'Souza of UCD School of Classics. I was in with him doing an interview a few weeks ago for a podcast I'm doing on the importance of classical studies. And then, of course, Miss Donoghue, my teacher, is going to do one on Alexander the Great, and I hope to do one next year on Julius Caesar. So
and is it only for teenagers?
Well, the age group that I set it between is 13 and 21.
Just say a 40-year-old wanted to take up the classics. What would you say? They'd be debarred.
Well, I've actually had an interest expressed from some, like, my parents' friends and sort of my grandparents' friends. They'd loved me to do sort of like an evening where I allow people of sort of who are above that age to come in and learn about classics. So I have considered it, and I may indeed look into doing it sometime in the near future.
But you'll have to focus after transition year on the Leaving Cert, so that may preoccupy you, not leave you as open to the society and its activities. By the way, what did you get in classics in the junior cert?
I got a B. Because it's sort of a very difficult essay subject. That was sort of it. So.
Right, okay. And you give the lectures. Are there certain things that you mentioned about the relevance of the classics to our lives today? Are there any elements of what you lecture on that you would apply to Ireland today, for instance, that we might be doing better with if we adopted the classical approach?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things that I like to lecture quite heavily, or I like to include in my lectures. I think paralleling is very important when you lecture.
What's paralleling?
So when I sort of I would get a point from classics and say, well, it's not that dissimilar, because people often, when they view the past, they'd like to view it as a completely different thing. Everyone there was an alien. They thought differently. They weren't. They were all human. They were all the exact same. They were the same as us. They were in a different environment with different religion, but they were human. They were people. So you can't dehumanize them. They're the same sort of thing. So it's not right to say, oh, it was a completely different world. They were people. They lived their lives like we would today, albeit without technology and radio and TV. But they were there, and it's sort of, you can't disregard your past.
And which particular characters appeal to you most?
For me, Julius Caesar is obviously top of the list. He's been sort of an interest in mine since the very start. Aristotle, I love his philosophy. It's sort of a very, very, very interesting, and indeed sort of helps you with day-to-day life. There's Alexander the Great, who I think is more so interesting because of we don't have that many sources. surrounding him, so it's hard to get a non-biased sort of look at him. And then just sort of I'm still yet to find a topic in classics that doesn't interest me. So really sort of anyone, any sort of classical figure will show an interest to me. And Pythagoras was one of the characters I did a lecture on because he's so misrepresented and he's thought of as only the guy who did the theorem, but there was a lot more to him. Well, I think sort of the main thing that people think of him, he was a mathematician. He wasn't actually. He was a religious leader and a priest. I mean, obviously he wasn't a Catholic priest in that sense. He was a pagan priest, if you want to look at it like that. And he was head of a mystery religion that based themselves around mathematics, but they were still very much a religion.
And Oscar, what else are you interested in apart from the classics, or does this consume all your spare time?
It consumes a fair bit of my spare time, but I am big into my sport. I do fencing a lot. I'm a member of Pembroke Fencing Club, and I sort of spend a lot of time on that. I'm interested sort of across the board in a lot of things. Like I like science. I like sort of physics in particular. I find very interesting, and I was disappointed I couldn't sit it for my leaving cert. And then of course history. All history interests me. It's just sort of I don't know. I've still yet to find something that doesn't necessarily, at least one aspect of, doesn't interest me.
Doesn't appeal to you. And now we're going to do something which might be a bit unfair, but we're going to do it anyway. We're going to have a quiz. We're going to give you a quiz on classics. So I think you got about 3 minutes notice of this. Okay, Oscar McHale, question number 1. Who were Achilles' parents?
Oh God, the sea nymph Thetis and Peleus.
Well done. 1 out of 1. Where was Alexander the Great from?
Macedon, northern Greece.
How many Greeks died at the Battle of Marathon?
192.
In what country is Troy located?
It was back then. It was in Asia Minor. It's modern day Turkey.
Which Roman emperor defeated Cleopatra of Egypt?
That would have been Augustus or Octavian, as he was known.
And which order of architecture is the GPO?
Oh God, I can't. I think it. Is it Ionic?
It certainly is.
Yeah, okay.
Well done, that's great.
Thank you.
6, you answered 6 questions, you got 6 right. You passed on no questions. Yes, you truly are an expert on the classics, and good luck with the society.
Thank you very much.
By the way, do you charge in?
No, it's absolutely free. I mean, we put out a donation bucket sometimes just to pay for stuff like the baking goods and stuff like that, so that we don't have to self-fund it entirely ourselves. But it is free.
And
we're non-profit.
If people are interested in it, is there a place they can contact you?
You can find us on Facebook, www.facebook.com/Classical Youth Society Ireland. You can find us on Twitter @CYSI_. Or if you have a direct inquiry or want to contact us directly, you can email us at cysiofficial@gmail.com.
Oscar McHale, thanks a million for coming in this morning.
Thank you so much.
And good luck